Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hi, Bo Prabhu. Please accept my obeisances.
Please accept my obeisances. I don't see you.
I see me, and I don't see you. So I don't know. I don't use Skype a lot, so I'm not sure what I'm doing.
Okay, anyway, it's not necessary.
Okay, now I see you.
Okay.
Is that better? Can you see me now? Okay.
Yes, now I see you.
Okay. Okay, good.
Okay, I want to apologize because maybe my English is not good enough. So if anything, you just ask me if you don't understand what I said, okay?
Certainly. Your English is much better than my Russian, so...
No, anyway, just we have to understand each other.
Okay. So, I know you were very clear, thank you very much, on what you're looking for. You know, I'm not able to encourage you that most of what you're looking for is possible, but maybe we can talk about, you know, what the underlying problems are, right? You know, because you put a lot of effort into bringing this situation to people's attention. You know, it's not a question of they just don't know what's going on, right? They do know what's happening, but they're not reacting the way that you're hoping, right? Does that sum it up?
Okay.
Okay. So I think maybe we should talk about why that is. You know, what's happening that's preventing the outcome that you're looking for.
Preventing what?
Okay, so why is it that the authorities are not, you know, taking up the issue in the way that you are hoping that they will? What is, you know, what's the problem, I guess, is what I'm saying.
And what is it? How do you think?
Well, I know, like, I'm like you. If somebody lays out a logical thought process, you know, I tend to follow along and, you know, even if I don't agree with the conclusion, I can understand how they got there. And very frequently, I'm persuaded by logic. Okay. Most people, I think, don't make decisions based on logic. You know. So my experience is whenever it's an issue that involves male and female relationships, it involves any kind of human relationships. If I have to lay out more than a couple of steps based on logic, I'm going to lose my audience. In other words, their pre-existing feelings and, you know, emotions are going to just be carried into their thought process so that they're not being objective. Okay? And psychologists call this confirmation, or one aspect of it is called confirmation bias. In other words, we take in information based on our pre-existing beliefs. So if I have a pre-existing belief that whenever men and women get together, it's the woman's fault, right? I'm going to interpret evidence to support that conclusion. I'm going to think that women who make accusations are not reliable. I'm going to tend to believe men who say, hey, you know, she was all over me, I tried to resist, you know, and you see it in politics too. You know, you see it pretty much everywhere. So my experience has been that when I bring up an issue to leadership, whether it's on a local level or the GBC or, you know, whatever, if I can't put the information in a way that they can process it, they're just going to ignore me. Okay. And I found your video very much like that you're going from, you know, this piece of information to this piece of information to this piece of information. And I suspect what's happening is they're just going, okay, well, I don't believe that, I don't believe that, I don't believe that. You know, does that kind of reflect the feedback that you're getting?
No, what you don't believe? What do you mean?
No, it's not that I don't believe it. Okay, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that, for instance, we had a situation here where I live, where a young man got into relationships with 3 different women at the same time, and was sexually and physically abusive to all 3 of them. Okay, each woman reported to the temple authorities, and the temple authorities didn't believe each woman, right? Okay, and suddenly I'm looking at this and I'm going, no, wait a minute. You have 3 people who are giving you exactly the same story. Something on here, we need to look deeper, right? And then they did a background check and it turned out there were 8 women, and you've been kicked out of another temple because of this. But that tendency to think, well, they were in a relationship and now she's mad at him and she's saying all this stuff. That, they just went there. They automatically went there, even though they were hearing 3 different women say the same story. It was just like, oh, well, she's probably lying. Oh, well, she's probably lying. Oh, well, she's probably lying. And they probably would have just kept doing that, no matter how many women there were, until, we're in a conversation and I'm saying, no, look, 1, 2, 3. You have to at least look deeper. So I see that tendency playing out here, right? Where it's, well, we don't want to get involved because it's, he said, she said, we don't believe the evidence that you're presenting. And so my point is, just taking the same information and giving it to the GBC, you're going to run into the same biases, right?
Okay, and what you believe should be done?
Okay, so my perception is that this is a much more complicated issue, that we have to change culture as much as we have to deal with specific situations. Okay. Now, my understanding is that Sri Gornitai has been banned from temples in Russia.
No.
Okay. No. Okay. Well, that's what the leaders believe, is that he's in Lithuania and that he's not supposed to go to any of the temples in Russia. So, I guess there's 2 issues. One is, do the leaders take action? And then the second is, if they take action, is that enforced? Okay. So, if it's not being enforced, I think we kind of have to unpack, is that because the leaders are, like banning him, but then wink, wink, saying, do whatever you want? Or is it because the local temples aren't following what the leaders said, right? Because there's two different levels there. Now, what he did was child abuse, okay? And so the International Child Protection Office has the jurisdiction to make restrictions on any leader that engages in child abuse. Right? So if he qualifies as an ISKCON leader, if he's giving classes, it sounds like he was in that category of being a leader, right? Mm-hmm. So they have the jurisdiction to make a case out of this and to put restrictions on him. Normally you need a complaint from the victim, okay? In this case, he's confessed, so they may not need that complaint, okay? And I talked to Mahabalaram, and he said he would report this to the Child Protection Office, and I have somebody following up to make sure that he actually does this, okay? Or somebody does it, at any rate. This is the kind of thing that the Child Protection Office is really focused on. And the fact that it wasn't reported to them in the first place means that we have more education to do in Russia about what constitutes child abuse and what the leader's responsibilities are when it takes place. Okay. I do have concerns about the video, just because whenever we have a victim of child abuse or domestic violence or whatever, it's really important to give them agency over what happens to their story. So when we report to the Child Protection Office, it's confidential, and they're not going to share anything publicly without the victim's consent. Okay. Videos that are on YouTube and things like that, they can re-traumatize the victim. You know, if people are talking about it, or if they become aware that everybody's watching this video, if they're not named, that's helpful. You know, but a lot of times, just from the details of the story, people in the local community know who's being talked about. So I would urge you to, you know, be very careful about publicly identifying situations where, you know, the victim maybe doesn't want the story out. Okay. That's important for their recovery. I've also found, because I've used this same tactic, you know, fix this situation or I'm going public, you know, I found that it's not necessarily an effective tactic. You know, it can work, but usually it doesn't. Usually what I see happen, and it's happened to me, is that it then becomes about the credibility of the person who's publicizing the incident, right? You know, I become like crazy or vindictive or, you know, whatever. And so nobody's taking what I'm saying seriously. You know, and I'm concerned that that may happen to you here. That instead of people, you know, leaders looking at this and going, oh, this is a situation we have to fix, they're going to look at you and go, oh, you're the problem we have to fix, right? And I don't know if that's ever happened to you before.
You didn't tell what you believe should be done.
Okay,
so
what I believe, with respect to Shigornitai, I believe the Child Protection Office needs to ban him from leadership. This is typically what happens with somebody who's done what he's done. They're banned from any leadership for some period of time. That means no, you know, no management positions, no giving classes, no leading kirtans, you know, that kind of stuff. Generally speaking, with what he did, they would probably institute a lifetime ban on him staying on ISKCON property, you know, and definitely a lifetime ban on working with children or, you know, probably in his case even associating with children that were not his own. You know, if he gets married, he has kids, and his kids have friends, it gets complicated, but, you know, as long as he has no children of his own, they're going to want him to just stay away from children in general. That's the standard procedure for circumstances like this. Okay. Now, with respect to Vijay, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yes, Vijay Gauranga.
Vijay Gauranga. That one's a little more complicated. In ISKCON, we don't actually penalize, like we don't have standard punishments for people who break regulative principles, right? Sometimes it's really up to, you know, the local authorities, local communities. If somebody, you know, drinks a cup of coffee, you know, do I think that the temple authorities should be, you know, putting sanctions on them? No. You know, if somebody's doing it routinely, you know, and they're pujari, do I think maybe they need to give up their service? Yes. You know, so it's kind of a balance there. And I think it's a little difficult to unpack exactly what happened. You know, I mean, I tend to believe if somebody says, you know, I had illicit sex with this guy, I tend to believe that it happened, right? Even if the guy says, no, nothing happened. Okay. I'm not sure. I don't think that warrants a response from the international level. Okay. And then the fact that the woman committed suicide, you know, again, that's a problem. You know, something needs to change here, but I'm not exactly sure what to do about it. Now, that said, in North America, we have a policy that prohibits leaders from having sexual relations with their congregation members. Okay? And in a similar situation where the woman attempted suicide but didn't actually kill herself, so she was around to tell her story, the leader in this similar situation was banned from leadership for 5 years, you know, and Maybe he had to contribute money for her counseling and some other things. There's, in process is the creation of an international office to deal with this issue of, it's called pastoral abuse. Okay, so they are developing an office, but there is not international support for this rule. Okay, so in North America, we've accepted that, definitely if you're a leader, you're banned from having a relationship with your congregation member, period. We don't care if it's consensual or not, just don't do it. But on the international level, that's not an accepted rule. Okay, is that, in Russia, is that generally seen as something bad where, like, a professor has a sexual relationship with a student or a boss with a worker? Like, is that punishable in Russia at all?
No, it's not punishable. In Russia, we have some very weird laws, like domestic abuse was, it's not a criminal case.
Right. Okay. So, we don't become devotees in a void. We have all our conditioning that we bring with them. So when you're dealing with leaders in Russia, they haven't been educated to see this, a consensual relationship, as necessarily a problem. Like they aren't trained to see that as an abuse of power. In North America, because, we've had so many public issues around this kind of thing. Sorry, I got to plug in my phone. Leaders are more inclined to say, yeah, the abuse of power is a problem and we don't want that to happen. So, if somebody said to me, Radha Dasi, you come in and make a plan for this situation, I'd be focusing on education as opposed to trying to convince people to do something that they're not inclined to do. And I know that that's frustrating and slow, but, sorry, I have to fix this now. But that's just been my experience that, doing it otherwise doesn't necessarily work. And, sorry. Here in America also we have like a long history of activism for changing society around, racial discrimination, gender discrimination. And what I've been taught and what I've also seen is that you can't change these things only from the outside, right? So no matter how right we are, but I mean, just look at, slavery or something like that. No matter how right you are, the outsiders can't change things by themselves. There has to be somebody in the power structure that is advocating for the change as well. Now, I know that we want to say, look, these are devotees, right? And Prabhupada's standards are very clear, and so, what's the problem? Why do we have to look at this from, like, the psychological point of view, or, civil activism or whatever? But, I mean, you see the reality, right? They don't want to, or they don't see the situation the same way you do, right? They're seeing it as...
That's why I sent this letter to GBC.
Right,
because
but
who else? They will not listen to me, right? If I'll do some educational courses or whatever, right?
Yeah. So, it's not even courses. It's not formal education. But here's the thing: is the GBC is not going to see it any differently. Their first instinct is going to be, this is a regional problem. We don't want to get involved. Their second instinct is going to be, we don't want to be policing people's relationships. I mean, just imagine how, because to be fair, if you have a rule that says a consensual relationship can be punishable, you are going to have women who are going to make false accusations, right? That's going to happen. We're always balancing, like, would we rather protect women and maybe have some innocent men have consequences, or would we rather protect the men and have some women be victimized and then get away with it? So, we balance which way we want to go. So their point is going to be, we don't want to be policing people's relationships. We don't want to make such a harsh, and that's what they've been saying, we don't want to make such a harsh standard for our leaders when, women may be taking advantage of them. That's how they're going to be thinking. And also, just practically, this situation comes up over and over again throughout the world. If the GBC gets involved every time the situation comes up, they would be doing nothing but handling these cases. And in North America, in fact, they had to draw a line and say, okay, we're going to regulate leaders, but we're not, but only for sexual misconduct. And they put a couple of other limitations in, just because there were too many cases of it. Okay. So if the goal is to make sure that somebody gets punished for what they've done, a particular individual gets punished for what they've done, that's a hard thing to do, and it's probably not worth the energy that you'd be putting into it. If the goal is to kind of change the system, I think that's definitely doable, but it's a long-term process. Okay, and it's also going to require allies. I am concerned that you're kind of the face of all of this. You're the one in the video. You're the one who's circulating it. It's all on you. So it just becomes so easy to discredit what you're saying simply by painting you as, somebody with whatever issue. And you probably know better than I what is going to be said about you, right?
You think if even people will think about me something, then it will, they will ignore all the situation with these guys, with leaders.
I guarantee it. I guarantee it. Because it's not just going to be that they're going to demonize you, but they're going to have leaders from Russia saying, oh, no, we took care of the situation, it's fine. Or we looked into it and we couldn't determine what happened, and they're just going to go, okay, so, this lady is upset for whatever reason, but, really the situation's fine, they've taken care of it, and they're going to move on.
So what do you propose? You propose just to leave as it is?
I think the situation with Sri Gornitai definitely, that one should be handled by the Child Protection Office, and advocating to make sure that happens is really important. With the rest, I don't know, looking at the video and hearing from your spiritual master, and, I just don't see continuing to push on that particular issue as getting you anything but more problems. And I know it's frustrating. I mean, I don't know how many times in ISKCON I've been in a situation where an injustice is happening. I'm watching it happen in front of me, and there's nothing that I can do about it in that moment. Okay? And I've just had to learn that, okay, Krishna, for whatever reason, is allowing this to unfold. He's not giving me the service of fixing it, obviously, because I'm trying to fix it and it's not happening. And I just have to trust that in time, it is going to be changed. And I've seen that. But personally, I focus on what I can do that is going to actually make a difference. That doesn't mean you have to do that. Okay? If you feel like I can't sit by, I can't watch this, I have to do something, that's your decision. But what I'm trying to tell you is it's going to come at a great cost to you personally, and I don't think it's going to help.
What do you believe will help?
I think that there has to be a conversation started in Russia about women in general. I've only been there once, okay, but one thing that I saw that really troubled me is that women are not valued there. Women are definitely in ISKCON treated as second-class citizens. And all of the rest of this stems from that perception that, a woman has value only in relation to a man. She needs to get married, right? And the men are the ones who are, leading the spiritual women. You guys are doing all the service. The ladies are doing all the service, right? But the men are the ones who are, spiritually advanced and, get to go first and get to do everything, get to make the decisions because they're, and of course then women are exploited. You've conditioned everyone to think that they're not worthy. They're naturally going to be exploited. So even if you fix this one situation, it's going to happen again and again until that attitude changes.
I have much more such cases.
Of course, because the attitude is you guys aren't as important as we are, and the women are desperate to get married and desperate for validation from men, so they're vulnerable. And the men don't feel that they're doing something hugely wrong by exploiting them. That has to change.
So what you believe can help in this situation?
Okay, so, I don't know enough about the way the Russian leadership works to be specific about Russia. I can tell you in North America, because, in the 80s, we had exactly the same mindset and exactly the same kinds of issues, and even in the 70s and 60s. But I joined in the 80s, so that's my frame of reference. It took a lot of talking to the men who were already in the room with the leaders who would advocate for us. That was the beginning. And then part of what they did was bring women into the room, right? And then we're there to say, look, I know you guys are looking at it like this, but, speaking as your sister, here's how we're experiencing it. That does make a difference, but you have to build the relationships. Radha Swami told me once.
I think I didn't get what you said.
Okay, so people change their perceptions based on their relationships with other people. Okay? If I have faith in somebody, or I care about them, or I respect them, I'm going to listen to what they have to say. So until we get either men who have their respect, and have a relationship to speak up for us, or we develop the relationships with the leaders where they will listen to us. Those are the two things that have to happen.
Okay.
Okay. Now, do you have anything you want to add on that particular point or question?
Well, what I want to add. First of all, I don't believe that some official leaders like GBC, they should stand apart and we cannot do nothing. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Especially when people really can do something. And one more thing, I didn't hear what exactly we should do, because now it's a very complicated situation. Leaders don't have such values in their minds about women, right? And how to change it? I cannot change it. Other women, I think, also know. So who can? And in
Okay.
what way?
All right. So, GBC should do something. Yeah, I've thought for 15 years they should have authorized Vaishnavi Diksha gurus, but it took 15 years. Should is it doesn't really make much difference. I do think that there needs to be more conscious advocacy. That a group of Vaishnavis needs to come together and make a strategic plan for this is how we are going to advocate for changes.
I know how they easily can ignore it. Easily. No matter what kind of logic we have, what kind of some evidences, anything. They ignore
I agree.
everything.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying they need to come together and then say, okay, you guys, you have to do like this. They need to come together and figure out who are our allies, who's going to help us with this, who can we approach, and then go out and ask the men, how can we change this? What can we do? And I can't, be more specific because I don't know the situation. But maybe you start with a goal like, let's put sanctions in place for leaders who sexually exploit women. Maybe that's, a starting point. And you identify the men who are going to support that policy and you work with them to push it. Or maybe you, I don't know.
I can briefly explain you what situation in Russian is. We have national council, right? And Chitat Mahaprabhu is head of this council. Bhaktivedanta Goswami is like a non-official leader for all Russians, because he was like a first. He was secretary of Harikesh Swami, then he took first sannyasi in Russia. He was for 20 or maybe more years GBC. He was head of national council. So he is like very obvious and non-official leader even now, when he is not GBC anymore. Then Chaitanya Chandra Charan Prabhu is second Diksha Guru in Russian Diksha Guru in ISKCON Russia. We have only two Russian-speaking Diksha Gurus. So they are like very, very popular authorities. Even if some devotees have some other Diksha Gurus, but they listen to this both.
Sure.
So if Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Chaitanya Chandra Charan Prabhu and Achyutatma Prabhu have this opinion, so no one else can change it. No one else.
Okay. So two things. One is, obviously those are the people that you need to work on, and not by telling them, look, this is how it is, but by finding out who are they close to, who do they respect, who will they listen to, or going to them and saying, look, we have this problem with women getting exploited. What do you recommend, or what do you want us to do? In other words, kind of put it in their court that this is your problem. They may not come up with anything helpful at all, but at least you've started them thinking, like, oh, this is a problem that the community wants to address. This is a problem I need to be thinking about. Some places that's not terribly effective, but it's a tool. The other thing is, if you can't change the men immediately, you can change them. You just can't maybe change them, in this decade. But you change the women. Okay, so if the women are empowered to resist exploitation, that also changes the dynamic.
Why I made this video, it's not one reason just to show to everyone what is going on. Right now, the situation is in Russia is like women, they do not believe that men are exploiting them. They think it's normal. They do not know what abuse is. And especially they do not believe that, last 2 weeks, I started to publish some stories without names about women.
Yeah.
Some sexual abuse, psychological abuse, etc. And many of women, like, some of them, like, yes, I had this experience too, but some of them, like, I don't believe you, it's not like that, it cannot be in ISKCON, like, you understand.
Right.
So,
I do.
This video, it will help women to identify the problem first, and second, they will understand what is situation. That leaders will not protect them. Therefore, they will not go to them.
Yeah. That probably is the most important thing, in my opinion, that you can do, is to educate the women. And that's also something that the leaders should be able to support, right? That we want to make women aware of what an unhealthy relationship looks like and what a healthy relationship looks like. That's not very controversial, right? So, it shouldn't be as hard to do as, some of the other things might be. Because if the women, and let's slow down. My mind is going, my mouth isn't keeping. One of the most important parts of preventing child abuse is helping children understand what is abuse and what to do if they're in a situation where they might be abused, to empower them, And so the same thing is true for women. That, exactly what you're saying. This is not normal. It's not normal for a man to tell you, well, I'm married, but, you're the only one who's ever understood me, so please have sex with me. Or, Krishna wants you to have sex with me. Or, you will gain spiritual, whatever the hell they say. If we put those out on the table and say, look, these are the things you're going to hear, and none of them are true, and this is what happens, in situations where women have been misled like by that, that's very, very powerful.
About leaders to whom they can listen, Diksha Guru of Bhaktivedanta Swami is Radhanath Swami, and he is not reachable at all. In any way, you cannot have his darshan, you cannot write him a letter. Anyhow, I don't know any other senior devotees to whom he would listen. I knew some senior devotees in Russia, but he ignored them. First he said, oh yes, she's a hero, she's like for about Udara Kirti Mataji. He said, he sent me actually to her to take her association as a counselor, I don't know. But then when she told that what you're doing, she doesn't want to continue that relationships with him. Then he ignored her because she didn't agree with him. And about Chaitanya Chandra Charan Prabhu, his Diksha Guru is Jayapataka Swami. I sent this letter with the video to Mahavaraha Prabhu, his main secretary, but he didn't reply. So what can be done?
Okay, so again, you're not building a relationship before you're approaching people, and it's not something you can do. You personally can't, do all of this. It requires a team, and it requires a team of building relationships with people so that they will listen. That might mean, who do we know who is a Jayapataka Swami disciple who's close to Maharaj or Maharaj's servants? Who do we know that has Radhanath Swami's ear? Because there are people that you can approach who can help you get things done. That's how we do it. And that requires, like I said, building a team in Russia. That, Vaishnavas have to work together.
I have a team.
Good.
As I mentioned, this group of Soviet devotees, and I had relationships with Mahavaraha Prabhu. He is his secretary who is always with him.
Okay. Good. So, take advice. Like for us on the international level, Anutama Prabhu has been a huge help. And it's not that we necessarily go to him and say, okay, here's what we want you to do. We go to him and we say, here's our problem, what do you recommend? What can you do to help us? And that tends to be more effective. Men in general are not really responsive to being told what to do. The other thing I would recommend is that this group become more visible. Okay, again, as long as you're the one whose name is on everything, all anybody has to do is say, Haри-kanta's crazy, and then people feel empowered to not listen to you. Okay? So if there's a group of Vaishnavis, it's much harder to ignore. Right? So some of these ladies need to step forward and help you, in a visible way.
Actually, I have this group. I have some support. I have all, but you just don't see it. And,
right, that's what I'm saying. People need to see it. They need to see it.
How you imagine this?
Well, it let some of these ladies write things Let some of the other ladies make a video. Let them go to their communities and say, I want to start something on, for women on healthy relationships. But it's important that it be seen that it's a group issue and not just Hari-kanta's issue.
As I understood, GBC committee they ignored this video and they will do nothing.
Yeah, that's pretty much what's happening.
Nice.
Well, it's not nice. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So
why it is? Can you tell me?
Well, there's a number of reasons. One is they're maxed out busy. Another is they just don't see the problem of exploitation of women as a high priority. And another is if they don't know you, they probably didn't even watch the video. The chances that they watched the video, if they're not personally involved or care about women's issues, are very, very small.
Nice. Wow.
I write these huge reports that I spend weeks and weeks on issues that they've asked me to work on, and they don't read those. So.
I don't know what to add anymore. I don't see any reason to continue this. You told me nice things. I agree with it, and I'm using it. I'm doing this. What you are saying.
Okay.
But it's not helpful.
Sometimes it's not the right time for something. Or this is not the plan that Krishna has for this unfolding.
Do you believe this? Do you really believe this?
I've experienced it. I've seen it with the Vaishnavi Diksha Guru issue. I was ready to leave ISKCON like 5 years ago. I was just so frustrated and over it, and my spiritual master had to talk me down. And now I'm seeing that Krishna does have a plan, but it's not on my timetable, and it's not happening in the way that I wanted it to happen. But I do see that progress is being made, people's minds are being changed, circumstances are changing. And I've seen it in many issues in my devotional life that, are not on topic. But Krishna, this is Lord Chaitanya's movement. It's not, we're not, whatever one person does or a group of people do or think, it's not the end of what's going to happen. Because Lord Chaitanya and Srila Prabhupada are directing us. And then on a personal level, sometimes, Krishna can tell me something that, for me personally, a lot of my lessons have been around, I want to be the savior. That's my mentality, is that I don't like injustice, and I want to help people who are experiencing injustice. And sometimes Krishna's telling me I'm not the one who gets to do that job. That's just me personally. I'm not saying that's true for you, but for me personally, that's an important lesson Krishna's been teaching me over and over, is sometimes it's not my job to do it. He's got somebody else in mind who's going to do it. So when we look at any particular situation, there's so many different factors going on that sometimes it's hard to unpack. What is Krishna trying to tell me? What is going to happen?
I don't know what to say. I just want to finish this conversation, honestly.
Okay. I'm sorry I can't be more encouraging, but you're seeing what I'm telling you, that people aren't listening.
I don't believe that this is what Srila Prabhupada wanted.
I definitely am not saying that this is what Srila Prabhupada wanted.
So why are you doing this?
What am I doing?
You're
What do you mean by
ignoring.
doing this?
You're ignoring.
I'm not ignoring. I'm not ignoring, but I'm focusing on what can I do. Okay. If I mean, I don't know what you think I could do that would be different.
Okay. Okay, let me finish this conversation. Okay. Thank you for calling me. I'm very disappointed, and I don't believe this is right way to deal with this. Let's see what Krishna really wants.
Well,
Time will show everything.
okay, but please tell me what would have been a more helpful response for you? What were you looking for?
You're GBC. You have some
I'm not
authority.
I'm not a GBC. Okay?
You're not a GBC.
I'm Vaishnavi minister. I get to go to the meetings, but I don't have a vote. Okay. So.
But you have a responsibility. You have these contacts. You have some relationships about which you told me.
Yeah. Okay. So you were hoping that I could advocate on the GBC level.
Something like that.
Okay. I can't do that directly, okay, but there are two groups that could get involved that maybe can. Okay, there's the Sabha, which is the spiritual advisory body that has the opportunity to give input to the GBC. And there's the GBC deputies, who are the ones who actually draft the resolutions for the GBC. These people are much more approachable, okay, and they feed issues to the GBC. If Sabha and the deputies think something is important, the GBCs are much more likely to pay attention to it. Okay. So I can talk to some of the Sabha members about, it's not going to work if I try to bring it up as like, okay, there's a situation going on in Russia and we have to fix it. Okay. But if we bring it up in terms of we need policies that protect women from exploitation, can you guys talk about this? What you think it should look like? And but that's a process that unfolds over a couple of years. Right? And I'm willing to do that, and I will do it. It is what it is. There's nothing wrong, okay, with you continuing to advocate the way you're advocating and other people advocating in different ways. In fact, that's valuable. Okay? My concern is for you. I just don't want to see you burn yourself out and frustrate yourself doing something that's not accomplishing much and being isolated in the process. And, this thing with your spiritual master has me very troubled.
Okay, it's very late time for me.
Okay.
So, Hare Krishna.
All right. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.